now welcome to give evidence. I now welcome Mr. Evangelidis, Mr. Miell, and Miss Elliott to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your... Oh, sorry, they're not there yet. I'll wait till you get there. So Miss Elliott is with Miss Evangelidis.
Did you want to bring someone up?
I'll start at this end and we'll just go. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee? We'll start with you, Mr. Evangelidis.
My name is Tom Evangelidis. I'm just a citizen of the area.
My name is Geoffrey Miell. I've never been a member of a political party. I have a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Sydney, where my final year was in 1984. I'm now retired. I've been in Lithgow for the last decade. I appear here in a private capacity.
Thank you, Miss Elliott. And you, Miss Elliott, and you have somebody here helping you with...
Yes,
yeah.
I do. So I have Fran Chung here is here because I'm hearing impaired. Unfortunately, my hearing aid took this opportunity to die. So I have a cochlear implant on this side, and yes, Fran will help me if I'm missing anything.
No worries, thank you. And if you need us to talk louder, just let us know and we will do our best to accommodate.
No worries, no worries. I may ask you to repeat,
Yep.
and if I'm still not getting it, Fran will step in.
Thank you, Miss Elliott.
Just for the declaration, so my name is Sarah Elliott. I am a registered nurse, I'm a registered midwife and academic. I am a member of the Labor Party for Transparency. I was the previous candidate for Clare in the 2022 election for Clare. However, I am not the candidate this time.
Okay.
And I'm a member of New South Wales Nurses and Midwives Association.
Thank you. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. We've heard from two witnesses already, and Mr. Evangelidis, before we ask you to make a brief opening statement, would you state if you're a current or former member of a political party or a union or an investor in the renewables or nuclear industries, please?
I've never been a member of any party. I'm currently on Lithgow Council as an elected councillor.
Thank you very much. I now invite you to all make a brief opening statement. If you could please keep it to a few minutes each, just so that then we can get to questions. And we'll start with you, Mr. Evangelidis.
Thank you. We moved to Lithgow 4 years ago. Now, we could have moved anywhere in the state. We chose Lithgow. Affordability, the natural environment, proximity to Sydney, all major draw cards. I consider the Australian dream still be very much alive in Lithgow. My partner's from Brazil and we have a 6-year-old daughter attending school. We have invested every cent we have in Lithgow and have set up multiple businesses. Like us, if a family was choosing to move to a regional area and given the choice of two like regions, would they go to the one building the reactor or the one that wasn't? Human nature will dictate that answer. Rightly or wrongly, nuclear will never be a draw card, no matter how you pitch it for these families. We have all the factors for growth without the stigma of being home to a nuclear reactor. Am I alone in my thinking? Well, I've been elected to council and I was very clear about my opposition to nuclear, so it seems others do have the same view. I can't help but feel that politicians see our region as apathetic, desperate and an easy target. They suggest our region being cost-effective due to infrastructure. I would argue it has more to do with the opposition they would face on the coast. The IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, shows that 45% of nuclear plants in the world use the sea for cooling, with just 14 and 15 using lakes and rivers. We have a lot of coastline, and being close to a port is also another major economic draw card during construction. If governments are serious about nuclear, put them elsewhere. Let the politicians put them in their regions, near their holiday homes. Lithgow has done its fair share of heavy lifting for the state for a very long time. We have coal. Coal didn't stop me from moving here. Why couldn't our region be the last one to produce coal? We're okay with that. And maybe that might last longer than we think. Lithgow has a progressive council that is meeting the future head-on. The LEAP strategy, tourism rebrand, along with the state government's new visitor economy projection, all paving the way for a bright new future that doesn't include or need nuclear. Lithgow can either be a place people want to move to as opposed to having to move to. This is our phoenix moment. Nuclear in our region will stop that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Evangelidis. Mr Miell.
Yes, compelling evidence I see suggests it would not matter how much nuclear technologies cost, even if they were magically free, and they are demonstrably most certainly not, because nuclear technologies are demonstrably too slow to deploy from scratch to save us from blackouts, rising energy prices and the worsening climate crisis. In John Quiggin's testimony to the committee on the 15th of November 2024, it was suggested that despite, quote, a bunch of experience with so-called Generation 2 reactors last century, that's really irrelevant, end quote. I would suggest most Australians would reject any Generation 2 designs that have demonstrated or have a propensity for catastrophic failure, like, for example, USA's 3 Mile Island 2, the former USSR's Chernobyl 4, and the 3 reactors at Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station. What I think is much more relevant is the accumulating evidence concerning the deployment durations of the allegedly safer and better so-called Generation 3 and 3+ designs. I have prepared a document for the committee that examines the demonstrated deployment durations for the relatively limited number of post-Fukushima event Generation 3 and 3+ designs, and you should have them with you. Whether it is an AP1000, APR 1400 or EPR design, all completed projects to date for these designs have demonstrated construct to operate durations of more than 8 years. These nuclear power projects are consistently requiring substantially more than a decade to get up and running from scratch, when additional time for planning, approvals, financing, design, procurements and site preparation is also included. There are no civil SMR designs commercially available. Currently they are vaporware, and there are unlikely to be any until at least the 2030s, if ever. Meanwhile, most, if not all, ageing coal-fired plants in Australia will close by 2038, while global supplies of fossil methane gas will likely get scarcer and more expensive. By the time the first prospective civil nuclear power reactor in Australia may become operational from scratch, I would suggest likely 20+ years away. The global mean surface temperature is likely to be around +2 degrees C with a 30-year mean relative to the 1850 to 1900 baseline. Nearly all the Great Barrier Reef could be lost by then. Sydney and Melbourne would likely be experiencing 50+ degrees C summer days. It would not matter how much nuclear technologies cost. They are undeniably too slow to deploy from scratch to save the Great Barrier Reef and us from the worsening climate crisis. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr Miell. Ms Elliott.
Okay. Good morning, Chair, Deputy Chair and Committee. As I've mentioned before, my name is Sarah Elliott. I'm a registered nurse, midwife and nursing academic. I've chosen to present as a witness to this inquiry as a health professional who is deeply concerned about not only the proposal for nuclear energy and its subsequent environmental and potential health effects, but of the socio-political effects that this region has regarding industry, including energy. Lithgow, unfortunately, has been a political football as far as energy companies go. We've had the proposal of energy from waste. We've got a contentious pumped hydro, which we believe is the right project, but in the wrong area. And there's a lot of contention around that. Now we have nuclear added to the mix. And a lot of this is about saving jobs. Lithgow, I grew up here in Lithgow. Lithgow is my hometown. And in that time, I witnessed Lithgow lose a lot of jobs, a lot of manufacturing jobs. I grew up 2 doors down from what was Jetson's factory. That closed. It became Burley's. That closed. We lost Bonds. We lost ADI. The only MP who attempted to replace jobs was Gerard Martin, who's the former MP for Bathurst, and nothing has been done since to replace jobs. The problem with this is that it has created a very disenfranchised community, a community who is very susceptible to conservative ideas of we're going to save your mining jobs, we're going to save your coal-fired jobs. But the reality is that we are going to be closing mines, and Mount Piper Power Station has been earmarked to close at 2040, and that was brought forward by 5 years by Energy Australia, and we've known about this since prior to the last federal election. So it does concern me that our town has become extremely polarised on the subject of nuclear energy, on the subject of renewables, to the point where whenever people hear the word renewable, or if they even hear the word solar, they actively shut any discussion down. We have a lot of potential to have new industry here in Lithgow. Lithgow is the birthplace of steel, it's been the birthplace of refrigeration, and we could be the birthplace of the very first solar train, a world first solar train that was designed here in Lithgow and is running up at Byron Bay. We are canvassing right now to have the solar train potentially built here in Lithgow, and there is international interest. We need to look at the potential industries that renewable energy can bring. In terms of health effects, we do have the considerable concerns regarding health effects of, transport of waste, even through the Blue Mountains. Whether or not this is going to be guaranteed to be safe, the guarantees of safety with a nuclear power plant, will it contaminate water sources or not? And also the storage of energy waste. I mean, while people will say it's only a tiny amount, I mean, it takes centuries to break down. It's like a bank deposit. I mean, the more small amounts you add to it, it develops in interest, doesn't it? So you end up with a bigger problem, where renewable energy has no waste. And we know of the arguments that people put up saying that energy or renewable energy, like your nacelles and propellers and solar panels aren't able to be recycled. We know that they can, because we know that there is substantial movements in recycling that is open in Denmark. So now we know that these things can be fully recycled. So one of the things I need to say is that we need honesty from our political leaders, from no matter what party we are. We need honesty and no more misinformation.
Thank you very much. And just before we go to the Deputy Chair, I'd just like to welcome Andrew G, who's the current member here, who's here today. Thank you for coming, Andrew. Pleasure to have you. And we'll go to Mr O'Brien.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks very much to each of you for appearing today. Mr Miell, I'm sorry, Miell. Yeah. Apologies, Mr Miell. Mr Miell, you pointed out that coal is likely to close by 2038, and that is right, according to the Albanese government's coal closure schedule. 2035, 90% gone. 2038, the rest is gone. Ms Elliott, you made the point that the local plant was, its closure date was brought forward by 5 years. It's set to close by 2040. Mr Evangelidis, I'm not going well with the surnames today, am I? You made the point that coal's okay, and the importance of coal to this community. So can I start with you with putting those comments together? The current plant, which the owners have said will close later than what the current federal government plans for it to close. So the current federal government's plan is to close coal earlier. Are you happy with that?
The issue is...
I'm sorry, I'm starting with you, sir, given you were talking about the importance of coal to this community, and given you represent this community as one of their elected representatives, are you happy with the prospect of your local coal plant being closed earlier according to the plans of the Albanese government?
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting the importance of coal at all. I was suggesting that it's kind of the lesser of two evils, and it's there and it's operating. And given that there are coal places around the world still operating, there's new coal technology, I can't see, and we export coal. So for me, it's just, it's logical to continue what we have if there's a window to do it. Now, I respect the government's decisions for climate change and all that, and that's fine, that's good. But I don't see nuclear as an option.
Just so, because we are all on time.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
So my question is, on behalf of those you represent as an elected official here, are you happy with the notion of coal plants being closed earlier than what the coal plant owners have scheduled them to be closed? Are you happy with those coal plant closures coming early?
Just before you answer that question, Mr Evangelidis, you're representing yourself on a personal...
Yes.
You're not representing council, are you? No. Just confirming that, Deputy Chair, that he's representing himself.
Thanks, Chair. And that's why I phrased the question as a representative, not on behalf of council. As an individual who does represent the people locally, are you happy with the notion of the local coal plant closing early?
Do I have to answer yes or no?
It's your floor. I mean, I know the previous
as
question sought a yes or no from people. I don't try to do that to people.
For me, it's
I
a
would
lesser
prefer
of two
direct answer.
evils, and it's a more economically viable one, and it's here now, and it won't stop people from moving here, and that's my big issue.
No, I'm so happy if you don't yes or no, but prefer you don't answer a different question. So, if you don't want to answer the question.
I thought I did answer the question.
Speaker, please just be respectful in the audience.
And I apologise if it's my understanding. So I'm just not clear. Are you happy with the concept of the local coal plant being closed early?
Can I suggest the word happy isn't appropriate?
Go ahead. Are you pleased? Are you satisfied?
I would prefer coal to nuclear.
That was my question. My question has nothing to do with nuclear right now. It's specifically on what has already been stated by the three people before us right now. Based on all of those statements, coal to be closed by 2038. The current plant is scheduled to actually run longer. And my question to you is, given the current plant here today is now slated by the Albanese government to close earlier than the owners schedule it to close.
I think this is a very disingenuous statement.
Are you satisfied with that outcome?
No.
Can I ask you,
technical issues that you've got to consider as well. I draw your attention to my submission attachment number 1 document. On slide number 4, I list the expected closures for coal-fired generators. For Mount Piper Power Station, the commissioning date was 1992 to 1993. Most coal-fired power stations around the world have an expected life of between 40 to 50 years. So if you look at Mount Piper, the use-by-date range for Mount Piper is 2032 to 2043. And the AEMO's expected closure that year is 2040. So that's just within that use-by-date range by 2040.
Thank you.
The other issue is the coal supply, and I'll draw your attention to another slide which outlines the precarious coal supply local coal supply for Mount Piper Power Station. That's on slide number 6. We have Angus Place, where its production consent expired on the 18th of August of this year. They're supposed to be having a development application to extend the life of Angus Place with their so-called Angus Place West development application. They still haven't lodged an EIS with the New South Wales Government Planning Department. They've delayed that. Invincible and Cullen Valley are expected, their production consents expire on the 31st of December 2025. Clarence expires on the 31st of December 2026, And Springvale, which is the main supplier to Mount Piper Power Station, it's due to close on the 31st of December 2028. And the only remaining coal mine at this stage that has development consent to supply coal is Airlie, but they are only allowed to extract 1.8 million tonnes per year run of mine. That's not adequate to supply Mount Piper on its own.
And my last question, I might stick with you since you're speaking, if that's okay. You made comments about Generation 2 nuclear not being, it should be rejected. I think was your word, reject. But you were satisfied with the technology of Generation 3, Generation 3 plus.
No, I did not say
I'm sorry, okay, apologies. Were you saying Generation 3 and Generation 3 plus were improved technologies, or?
Well, the claim is it's improved and safer.
Right.
So I used the word allegedly.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. So my question was going to go to your comments on the timing for the construction of those plants.
That's
of
correct.
Generation 3, Generation 3 plus.
Yep.
And my question is, do you recognise the experience of the International Atomic Energy Agency with respect to advice on the timing of introducing nuclear energy to new nations, and also the experience and authority of ANSTO, the government's nuclear technology advisors, when it comes to the construction of nuclear power plants?
I look at the actual construction times around the world, and I prepared this document, which you should have with you, and I go through the Westinghouse AP 1000.
So sorry to interrupt. I know I'm also on a time thing here. So thank you for your submission, but my question actually was not how do you look at things, it was do you recognise the experience and authority of the IAEA and ANSTO on these matters?
I go by the actual data that I see.
Does that mean you do not recognise their experience and expertise, sir?
They have expertise, but what I'm looking at is the practical demonstration of how long it actually takes to deploy nuclear reactors around the world.
And the extent, therefore, to which your submission conflicts with the government's nuclear technology advisors and the International Atomic Energy Agency, you believe your submission should be listened to by this committee over and above?
Well, I just look at the data. The data says that for AP 1000, for KEPCO APR 1400 and for the EPR, the minimum time is 8 years for construction, plus you've got to add planning, and that's an additional 5 years at least. So you're looking at a decade and a half at least.
Thank you, sir.
Before you get one up and running.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I just would like to tidy up a couple of things the Deputy Chair was saying then, that it is not the Albanese Labor government's plan to close coal-fired power stations early.
I disagree with that. In fact,
please let me finish, Deputy
Well, you're referring
Chair.
to my comments,
Deputy Chair,
Chair. So if you want to have a
Deputy
discussion
Chair.
with me publicly, let's have that discussion, but you are making that decision.
Anyway,
You're
I'll
making that
just
decision
continue.
by seeking to rebut something.
The Chair's in a position to be able to
Thank you,
correct
Mr
the
Bennell.
record,
Thank you, Mr Bennell, and thank you,
respectfully,
Deputy Chair. So it is not the Albanese's approach to close down coal-fired power stations. It is AEMO report that is an independent market operator. I'd just like to bring.
The Prime Minister himself has confirmed in the Parliament is the government's plan.
Excuse me.
Ted,
Deputy
can you
Chair,
please have some respect for the Chair?
Not when you are directly trying to rebut something that I've said, Chair, of course.
Thank you, Deputy
But
Chair.
you're welcoming a response from me.
So Mount Piper announced its closure date, which is Energy Australia, that they were bringing it forward to 2040 in September 2021 when the LNP were in government. So that proves straight away that it is not our plan to close them early. The energy operators will close them when they choose to close them over time. I just wanted to clean that up.
It's a business decision. It is not a government decision. And I will say that I have read transcripts Mr O'Brien, where you have misled
So,
the
Chair,
Deputy
Deputy
Chair,
Chair, I was tidying that up. You tidy things up when I say things.
No,
so
you didn't
let's
tidy
just,
it up.
let's
I think you just
finish
made a bit of a
now,
mess
Deputy
because
Chair.
you just suggested that the operator decides when they have to close, but now we hear from Ms Elliott it's the private sector. So, Chair, are you right?
private
Is it the
sector.
operator who
Energy
closes?
Australia has chosen to
Oh,
close
so it's
that
private
plant
sector now. Okay, that's
in
right.
20,
So I'm just
in
tidying up what you
2040. Is
said,
that correct
Chair.
or not?
I'm just tidying up what you said, suggesting it was the
Thank you. Would
the
you
market
would you
operator.
mind me going on to my questioning now? Is that okay, Deputy Chair?
I'm more than happy now that I've corrected your rebuttal.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Thank you.
So disrespectful.
Mr
So,
O'Brien, can I ask you to afford this panel the respect that you gave the last ones? We may not be in agreement with your views, but can you please respect this panel that is before you right now?
I can assure you, Miss Elliott, that
Please.
this panel has
I'm
my...
disgusted with your
You-
behaviour
you-
as a representative.
I can assure you that this panel has my full respect.
I'm
However,
not seeing it.
where the chair has chosen to disagree with me publicly, I
And
do
he's
I do
actually
need to
correct, and I would actually ask
take
you
take
to
the
please shut up.
opportunity
Can
to
we,
respond.
can we all please be respectful in the room, please? This is a contentious topic, so let's please be respectful and let's get back to the questioning to the witnesses so that we can move on, please.
Correct.
Thank you. My question is, do you think it's disingenuous from the opposition to have a plan for jobs for this area in Lithgow when you guys have gone through job losses in this area through power station closures, through coal mine closures? Do you think it's disingenuous for them to be able to say that they will have these workers be able to walk straight into nuclear energy jobs here in this town? And we'll start with you, Mr. Evangelidis.
Yeah, I do. The majority of jobs are highly skilled, and unless we've got miners getting nuclear physics degrees, there'll be some jobs, of course. I'm looking at more of the sort of industries that won't want to come here if it goes ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Miell.
I think you'd be looking at least 10 years of planning before construction begins. You might have site preparation before the actual, and I'll talk about the definition of when construction happens. It's the point at which you first pour concrete for the base of the reactor. So that's the dates that they specify in the International Energy Agency's Power Reactor Information System. So these dates that I have here for the construction start date, that's the date that they first pour concrete for the base of the reactor. But things have to happen before that happens. You have to dig the hole, you have to put all the formwork in, you have to put in all the reinforcement bars, you've got to do all the preparation for roads and everything before that, procurements for all the long lead items. So all these sorts of things, it's a minimum of 5 years for planning before you get to the construction start date. And for Australia, I would suggest it be much longer than that, quite possibly 10 years. And then if you look at what's happening around the world, you're probably looking at least 10 years of construction time, from the start of construction of the reactor base to when you actually start having full commercial operations.
Thank you. Just quickly for you, Ms. Elliott.
So I think that it's disingenuous to think that people working in a coal-fired power station can go straight away into working into a nuclear power plant, because they'll be closed before you have a nuclear power station up and running.
Thank you. I'll just ask one more question because I'm on a time frame as well. And we'll start with you, Ms. Elliott, for this one. Do you think it's acceptable that we don't know whether Lithgow will be the first site that has a nuclear power station that's proposed by the opposition to be built, considering we don't know what reactors they're going to use, we don't know what size reactors they're going to use, we don't know how many reactors they're going to have on each site, we don't know what water they're going to use, we don't know how much they're going to cost, we don't know how long they're going to take to build. Do you think that's acceptable for the workforce here?
Absolutely not. It's absolutely not acceptable. It's pie in the sky. The problem for Lithgow is that we need new jobs now. We can't look into the future of when nuclear power station might suddenly appear on the horizon. We need jobs now. And this is where we're having this polarisation in the community, where people have, you know, become so politicised about it that they shut down any potential industry that renewables could bring.
Thank you. We'll go to Miss Ryan, Dr. Ryan, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So it's a little bit hard to hear over the squabbling. I just wanted to ask the witnesses about their feelings about gaining public licence for the renewables transition. Obviously, there's some reluctance around nuclear, but we've heard from other people that their experience of the introduction of renewables has been really suboptimal. Can I just ask these witnesses for their feelings in that regard?
I'm not hearing it.
Could you just repeat that question, please, Dr. Ryan?
Sure. I'm wondering if these witnesses can give us a feeling for their experience of the renewables rollout in any region and whether they have any commentary on it, because we've heard from a number of other witnesses that they've been very dissatisfied with it.
Start with you, Mr. Evangelidis.
Yeah, I don't have much experience here. For me, the people that are directly affected by the rollouts, they're the ones that should be speaking on it. I think that anyone in the community that isn't directly affected by it is really just trying to jump on a bandwagon. So I can't comment on that. So it doesn't affect me.
My name's Jeff. My experience is just with a few projects. There was the Neoan's Great Western Battery project. They had a number of public sessions to provide information to the public, and then also there was the Green Spot Wallarwang 9 battery project, and again they had some public discussions. But from what I see, and also there was the Energy Australia's pumped hydro project where there seems to be quite a lot of opposition to that. My concern is where's the power going to come from? If we don't get replacement generation, we're going to have blackouts. So if we keep objecting to any sort of generation that can be deployed within a reasonable time frame, we're going to have blackouts, and that's my major concern.
Okay, in terms of the renewable rollout, I know that there has been opposition. There is wind farms that are proposed out at Oberon that has been met with opposition, but what you find often it is people that have become ideologically and politically opposed to the point where they will not even engage properly with the companies to find out more information. There's a lot of good examples of solar farms as well as wind farms, even out at Mudgee, between Mudgee and Wellington. It has not stopped farming. In fact, there is agrivoltaics, there is such thing as agrivoltaics, and we do have emerging research that's showing the benefits of farming and agrivoltaics. In terms of the pumped hydro, there has been contention about the pumped hydro, and one of the problems I find is the eggs in one basket approach that we have. Energy Australia, want pumped hydro at Lake Lyell, but we haven't considered alternative sites such as former mining voids. Like we've got one up at Muswellbrook, which is going to be using by AGL a former mining void, and that hasn't been investigated here. And I honestly think pumped hydro is necessary, but maybe we should be looking at other options as well.
Any other questions, Dr. Ryan?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms Mascarenhas.
Hi, thank you for your testimony today. If the consultation process that the Coalition went through was genuine, would you agree that the community should be able to vote no and stop the development of a nuclear power station?
Yeah, I think a plebiscite would be a great idea.
I think the public should be properly informed about the pros and cons of nuclear. I think the Australian media are incompetent, well, most of the media is incompetent about describing the pros and cons of nuclear power. I go back to my submission, and it's the deployment times. If you can't deploy something within the time frame that's required, it's no good to you. It wouldn't matter how much it cost, any of the other factors. If it takes more than 20 years to get a nuclear power station up and running, in the meantime, you've got increasing emissions, you've got a worsening climate crisis, and you've got all these coal-fired power stations that are due to close, you are going to have blackouts, you are going to have rising temperatures. Nuclear is just too slow to deploy. And people need to be informed of this. They need to be informed about how long it actually takes to get a nuclear power station up and running from scratch. Not just say how much time it takes to construct. You've got to add in all the other issues that have to happen before construction occurs.
Absolutely. I think any community should be able to vote no against nuclear. In honesty, I think that there are precedents that we should look at. We do have a state that does not have a coal-fired power station, in fact doesn't even have nuclear, runs on the majority of renewable energy, and that's Tasmania. I mean, why can't we have a look at models other than nuclear, other than coal, so that we can transition properly to these things?
Thank you.
And do you think your community would be comfortable with $1,200 to $1,400 electricity increases to their annual bill if there indeed was the nuclear policies are implemented of the coalition?
I think that any company, any politician that's promising cheaper prices for any form of energy creation is lying. The only way your bill is going to get cheaper is if you go off grid. You don't get a bill. That is the only way. I don't believe any promises about bills getting cheaper.
I should clarify. The modelling shows that electricity bills would actually increase, and the annual increase would be $1,200 to $1,400 a year.
Well, no one would be happy with that.
If that question referred to the coalition's plan, that modelling is not on the coalition's plan. So, Chair, could I suggest that question be rephrased, given that modelling does not reflect the coalition's plan?
Could you just maybe rephrase that?
Cool, happy to do that. Some modelling that shows nuclear power stations being the Australian electricity grid shows that electricity prices would increase by $1,200 to $1,400. Do you think your community would be comfortable with that?
I'd suggest that no community would be comfortable with that.
I'd agree with that.
Would your community be happy with a rise of $1,200 to $1,400 in electricity?
That's my last question.
Well, no community would be happy with an increase in their electricity bills. And one thing I will have to say is that the Australian Energy Market Operator has noted that renewables actually have put downward pressure on prices for energy. However, given the capitalist market that we have, it's often the energy companies that increase their prices and absorb that.
Thank you, Ms Mascarenhas. Mr Burnell.
Thank you, Chair. Just in line with some of the questioning just by the previous member of the committee, Ms Mascarenhas, I just want to go to a Facebook post made by Peter Dutton, the Leader of the Opposition, 8 days ago. Posted that electricity bills are now up to $1,000 higher than what Anthony Albanese promised 3 years ago. You couldn't believe him then, you can't trust him now. Australians deserve affordable, reliable and cleaner power, and that's what a coalition government will deliver. That's the post that he put up 8 days ago.
Table that, Mr Burnell.
Happy to table that. My question to you is that what do you think the coalition government are going to be able to do to bring down power prices if elected to government in 2025?
Nothing.
Overnight?
Nothing.
As I mentioned before, ever since it was all sold off to the private sector, they can't guarantee that. It's just political spin. Going off grid's the only way. I
do want to say thank you for providing evidence today, and Mr. Miell,
Miell.
sorry. Your submission is probably one of the most well thought out submissions I've read so far throughout the whole of this inquiry. So, and I thank you for the fact that it is so clearly laid out. I want to go, I think it's page 32 of your submission. It talks about hurdles for nuclear projects in Australia and some of the legislative issues that we are likely to encounter. I wondered if you would like to expand on some of those.
Well, the first hurdle is getting control of both houses of Parliament to change the legislation that bans nuclear power. Now, until you get control of both houses of Parliament, you can't proceed. So that's the first hurdle. The second hurdle is looking at, you've got the state governments, they've also got prohibitions. So you would have to negotiate with all the relevant states and territories to, and you may well have court cases, and that's going to take time. The third thing is that you've got all the private owners of these sites, and you would have to pay compensation for taking over their sites. So that's going to take time, negotiating, a just compensation. And then the fourth hurdle is the time it takes to actually build a power station and get it up and running. So to my mind, if I look at what's happening around the world and then compare it with the situation here in Australia, we don't have any experience building a power reactor. We have experience building a research reactor, but it does not produce electricity. And you're looking at chalk and cheese between a research reactor and a power reactor. So if you look at the research reactor at Lucas Heights, its thermal capacity is only 20 megawatts. You compare that with a power reactor like the UAE's APR 1400 reactor, you're looking at a thermal generating capacity of almost 200 times that. Mm-hmm. And if you look at how much uranium is in the research reactor at Lucas Heights, you're only talking about 35 kilograms of uranium in the core. Whereas if you look at the UAE's reactor at the Baraka site, each reactor has between 80 to 100 tonnes of uranium. So much larger orders of magnitude you're talking about. Much bigger things that you've got to have, much more complication. And that all takes time to build.
Final question, Mr. Burnell.
I'm going to go back to social licence because I think it fits in with part of what we started talking about then. And we've heard from other questions about the way in which we undertake social licence and the community consultation piece. Do you think it's of utmost importance that the communities that have been slated, the 7 communities have been slated to host potential nuclear power generation sites, should be given the right to veto as part of that consultation process?
Absolutely.
Yes, I agree with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burnell. Thank you for your time today. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, including questions on notice, please forward it to the Secretariat by Friday the 10th of January 2025. Please note that responses to questions on notice will be published on the website as submissions to the inquiry. You will be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence to assist you with answering questions taken on notice today, and you'll have the opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. Thank you very much for appearing before us.
Can I suggest you read this book by M.V. Ramana, and I may also suggest that you get in contact with him and perhaps have a discussion with him.
Could you please just forward that to the Secretariat of who to get in touch with there, and the Secretariat will forward that on to us.
He's one of the co-authors of the World Nuclear Industry Status Report.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.